have everybody here for this panel called Emerging Indian Voices in Indian in SFF. Sorry, I'm Shinjini, and I'm a editor and writer mostly of long form criticism, but I also do short stories in science fiction and fantasy every now and then. Last year, I won the Dream Foundry writing contest, and which is why they gave me the space to come on here. And I thought I would have my peers, if may call you that, to talk to me a little bit about their writing and their publications, their styles, influences, all of that. So I hand it over to you guys. Will you please introduce yourself, Archita?
Hi, so I'm Archita. I'm primarily a writer of speculative fiction and sometimes an editor and occasionally an artist. I completed my master's in English from Jadavpur University in 2020 in the middle of the pandemic, and I'm currently trying to survive as a freelancer. I also love playing indie games and writing fan fiction and reading tarot cards for friends and strangers and eating junk food. And while I've been reading fantasy novels and writing for most of my life, I actually started writing short stories from my university years around the same time that I discovered online magazines like Strange Horizons and Uncanny, and I realized that speculative short fiction was its own thing. So yeah, I guess that's about it from me. And thank you so much for having me here. It's amazing.
Great. Runa?
Hi. Again, I'm really sorry for being the person who delayed this. I was just setting up everything. So quick introduction. I am Shashwati. I also know Archita. She is my junior from Jadavpur. I did the same course as her, though I only knew her after we started talking post-college. I am currently based in New Delhi, in India, and I work in a development sector organization. And I've been writing for as long as I can remember. My primary interest is in horror/weird fiction, but much like Archita, I'm also a huge gamer, and a lot of what I write is influenced by a lot of the video games that I play. I'm so excited for this conversation. Thank you.
Yes. Hi, Chaitanya. Could you please introduce yourself?
Hi. So I currently live in Bangalore, India. I did my master's in publishing and writing from Emerson College, where I graduated in 2019. So since then, I've done a little bit of editing here and there. I've edited a few issues of Mithila Review and a few things like that. But for me, I only started thinking of writing seriously when I was in college, in Emerson College, and more so after editing for Mithila for a little while and finding out about all of these short fiction mags and things out here. So primarily what I write is fantasy, and more specifically fantasy that is focused in and around South Indian myths. So yeah.
Okay. So really nice meeting all of you. I'm really glad to have all of you here. Okay, so I wanted to basically start off by asking you about your influences. What got you into writing science fiction or fantasy or weird fiction or horror? Which are your go-to genres or your go-to authors when you start off? Tell me a little bit about that. Chaitanya, could you start?
Oh, geez. So what got me started on my particular brand of writing, or just generally interested in
what do you go to? What do you turn to when you want to read a little bit? Who is your favorite writer? Along those lines.
Oh no. I think if it's going back to what got me interested in the genre itself, then it's all the way back to things like Red Ball or Percy Jackson, things that I picked up when I was 8, 9, 10, somewhere around that range, and just what everyone called a phase, you grow out of it, you start picking up real literature at some point, that whole thing. But the more I read at that point in time, the more I wanted to keep reading the same things. And that just kept going into adulthood, I think. And for now, the things that I turn to are the things that are coming out that are by other Indian or South Asian authors, because there really has been sort of a boom
Yeah, there.
in this space in the last couple of years, and the things that like you guys are putting out and just all the others in this sphere are putting out right now are excellent.
That's nice to hear. I'm going to come back to your influences in a bit, but I want to hear from Archita.
Yeah, so like Chaitanya, I started like properly reading and stuff when I was in like ages 8 or 9 with like the stuff that's available in my school library, like the Enlightened works, A Famous Five and Secret Seven, and then I quickly moved on to Harry Potter. That was a whole phase, and from Harry Potter, like that was the door that opened the world of fantasy fiction for me. So I started reading like Chronicles of Narnia, Lord of the Rings, and the Aragon series, Percy Jackson, Artemis Fowl, like the whole crash course. And so like that's where my love for fantasy in particular started, and that's something I'm pretty sure I'll never grow out of. And then like much later, I remember I was like started watching like Tim Burton's movies, the whole gothic aesthetic, like that was another huge influence. Then reading Neil Gaiman's The Sandman graphic novels when I was in like class 11, like it influenced the whole like the dark fantasy aesthetic, and like, that's something that I keep coming back to in my writing. Also, the all the fairy tales and folk tales that I heard and read and came across when growing up. So that's also like a huge influence.
That's great. Any games you'd like to talk about particularly?
So many games. How do I just choose?
Okay, we just
Well, yeah, like there was this game called Spirit Forever that I think released in 2019, and it's a game about this person takes on the role of transferring souls to the afterlife, and except like instead of just taking the soul from one place to another, like the character, she talks to the different guests, talks about their lives and helps them find closure and move on. And so although the setting is very grim, like like people have died and they're gonna move on to afterlife and all, it's the game is so wholesome and cozy and beautiful. So the way that game like took the theme of death and dying, which is such a grim theme, and filled it with so much of hope and positivity. Yeah, so like that was a very beautiful experience, and I would like to like create something that inspires the same level of hope despite all the darkness that's around the world today.
Runa?
So like I think both Chaitanya and Archita have covered like 50% of my childhood while talking. So like Crash Course, same thing. As most of us growing up, yeah, I had the Harry Potter phase. I did a lot of fantasy reading, etc. Percy Jackson, definitely, I was obsessed with that for a couple of years. I also came from a largely like reading family. So like my grandfather and my father were like huge readers, and like they had like libraries of their own. So I remember like when I was growing up that my father used to read a lot of Bengali fiction to me because I'm unfortunately a very poor Bengali reader. So a lot of like, for example, Satyajit Ray's, which is where I realize now that I probably discovered a lot of the horror vibes or weird vibes that I have, that he was actually a really fantastic weird fiction writer. So I still remember his story Fritz still like lingers with me now, like I don't know, 20 years later or so. So like a lot of what I love now, that I'm now recognizing of the kind of horror I write or seek, is coming a lot from the like the when I was younger, the folk stories I used to hear, or the children's stories like Thakumar Chuli from my grandparents, or the kind of historical fiction that I would hear, read from Satyajit Ray or listen from my father. I mean, apart from that, I also was really like heavily influenced by, this is a little weird because I didn't read Lord of the Rings growing up because that book scared the heck out of me. It was like this, that. So I
It took me two tries. The first time I read like around half of it and I gave up.
I don't know
Then
how
I
people
saw the
read that
movies.
book.
I had a crush on Aragon, and then I was able to finish the whole
Oh man,
book.
I couldn't even get to Aragon. But I read a lot of The Hobbit, which I think was meant for younger readers. But I watched the movies, which was the important bit. And like getting there, I realized that a lot of like, I mean, I don't know, this could be like an incorrect thingy, but a lot of low fantasy, which I see now, like I think Martin is a little low fantasy. I see a lot of those vibes in Tolkien's original work, the slow build up of all of that. But anyway, those are a lot of my things while growing up.
Oh, that's interesting. I
Yes.
didn't even know any of that. I didn't know you read so much Bengali growing up. Like, listen to so much of it, at least.
Oh, yeah. Even I didn't know until I started writing.
Okay. Okay. Next, I'm going on to the next question because I feel like I'm going to sit around talking about this for a long time. So I wanted to ask you guys particularly, you know how they say that you have to write the stories that that you want to see out in the world. You know, that's a common adage of sorts. So what is it, the kind of stories that you are trying to write? What is your most ambitious thing here? It's a kind of a hard question to think about, but give it a shot. Archita?
What's it me? It's going. Okay, so I remember when I was like, one of my friends was reading one of my stories, and they said that like I always write about women and female characters and about them having agency or the lack of agency, and like I like that, and that felt like it was a surprise to me because I don't think of myself as someone who writes only about women. Like my characters are of different kinds of people, but then I thought about it and I was like, yeah, like I keep coming back to mostly women's issues and things like that, and then I realized that like in many of my stories, what I'm trying to do is like for people who don't have agency, who cannot have agency because of the oppressive power structures. So how do you negotiate with that? So like that's, I guess, kind of like an overarching theme that I am struggling with in my writing. And like, how do you write a short story uh, about all the varying levels of oppression, the invisible oppression that so many of us face, and at the same time imagine a happy future when the world around you is so bleak and depressing. So like how do you write a happy ending that doesn't feel like too unrealistic or too out of reach? At the same time, try to write a story that feels authentic to your lived experience. I'm not sure if I'm able to summarize.
No,
well.
I quite get it actually. I struggle personally a lot with happy endings. And I feel like all these calls that come out for happy stories, you know, hope in these bleak times are very difficult to cope with because I can't find it. And I wish there was a way to actually navigate that. And yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Like, if I write a very happy ending, I feel like okay, but like this feels too much like fanfic. It doesn't feel realistic. But if I write a sad ending, I'm like, okay, this is too sad. No one is going to read this. It's so depressing. So it's a tough balance.
it's also a certain kind of move in publishing that you know, necessitates this sort of demand for happy endings, and it gets quite difficult to wrangle yourself through it. Especially, I think Runa would relate because Runa's stories are not.
Oh man, I have so many thoughts on the move towards happy endings in publishing, but I've not yet voiced many of them.
Yes, but tell me about your the kind of stories that you're trying to write.
I think the kind
in
of
this
stories that I try
direction.
to. Sorry, I
Yes,
interrupted.
yeah, no, absolutely fine. Go on.
I was going to say the kind of stories that I write, I think, changes from literally from year to year, and it is heavily influenced by what I'm reading. But I think you're absolutely right that I don't like a kind of move towards happy endings for a personal thing for me. If I really want to think about it, and this is going to sound really gross and abstract and a little pretentious probably, but is that I really want to write stories about desolation and love together, if that makes sense. Because a person I was really influenced while reading, which is a recent thing, not a childhood thing, was Gene Wolfe. So I started reading him like in the last 5 years or so, and Mervyn Peake with Coleman Cast. And I realized that I don't know how to explain it, the immensity and magnificence of just buildings. And like if you imagine like a desolate building on a hill, like a castle or a fortress or an abandoned one, or another way I can explain it is through a certain video game I play, like for example thinking from software video games, like I think the Elden Ring is currently the biggest selling video game. Like I want to be able to capture that feeling like in a bottle and push it out into the world, and I just don't know how to do it. But that is what I want to kind of write. I think there's immense power without putting human beings into a story or having very like human beings in a story. So that's what I want to do.
Okay. Any thoughts, or if Chaitanya wants to?
Okay. Should I just go?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, this is a fairly hard question for me to answer, given that I'm generally trying to wrap my head around it most of the time. But I think one thing that most of my writing comes back to almost inadvertently is I want to sort of push out more queer and queer-coded Indian fiction, just as a sort of I don't want to say it's like pushing back against the general mindset in the country or anything that seems too grandiose, but basically it's just the idea is we don't see enough of that content within the subcontinent, I think. And in the mainstream, if you have to think of any queer media, the only ones that come to mind recently that are Indian focused are Tasha Suri's novels. And beyond that, the only thing that I can think of right now is Dostana, which is really not a good, it's not really what you want representation to look like. So that's something that most of my stories come back to, and it's something that I think more and more I'm actively trying to bring out. So yeah, I guess if there's something that I want as a theme or as like an overarching idea for my own writing, it's just to show that this is possible in like ancient Indian settings, effectively ancient Indian inspired settings rather.
Any reason why you picked the past rather than any other more current thematic like setting?
That's primarily out of interest. I think my interests weigh heavily towards say like the past of South India in particular, where you've got like the Chera Chora Pandya empires that lasted for a millennium in and around like the Mughal Empire and stuff. So there's a lot of history over there that really isn't being covered in media particularly. So that's something that I have always had an interest in, and it's something that I want to explore for my own works. Like it's much closer to home also for me.
That's important. Okay, that was really nice to hear from all of you about this, because it gives me a lot to think about my own sort of moves. Because when I write, I want something that something as personal as it gets. I want to hit at the core of honesty within myself. Like I feel like that's the first thing that I try to look to, and it's also why writing it is hardest. And I know it can be a bit of a cliche, but it's the move that I keep making. I keep digging through my own narratives, my own life. So what Chaitanya said, it's close to home as well. Okay, moving on to the next question. I wanted to ask about, so, especially right now, I feel like it's quite, as early career writers, if we are able to call ourselves that, holding full-time jobs and everything like that, we tend to, before we write, we tend to sort of obsess over what we don't want to do in a story, what we want to avoid, what we have to do perfectly, the things that we see other people doing and don't quite like, or the things that we see being done and want to incorporate into our own work. So, what is what are some examples of that for you? Runa?
Instantly threw me under the bus without getting ready. But it's actually a really complicated thing to actually answer, because I actually know what you mean. Because one of the things I noticed when I began to write was when I was submitting, because India, when at that time, apart from Mithila, I mean, I still don't think it has like a really like up and coming published SFF. Like a lot of the movements are in America. Like you have to publish in American magazines of necessity. Was I had to like read a lot of what the magazines themselves wanted, and because they specified in the submission guidelines, we don't want these things. We've already seen a lot
Yes.
of this. We want things. And I remember quite a bunch of times, I remember thinking, these are so broad. I mean, surely you wouldn't have seen every single new idea. And I think I got a little bit of like a bee in my bonnet about, definitely writing like some things. I still ended up doing it. I didn't want to, for example, write specifically about India, because at that time I had a bee in my bonnet being that if they want Indian stories from Indian writers, so therefore as an Indian, I only have to write Indian stories. And I remember I was like, I'm not going to be shoehorned. I'm not going to be like in that thing. It feels like I'm exploiting myself and my culture because they want hashtag own voices at that time. Of course, that movement has now seen its fair share of criticism. I still ended up writing them. And I have, like, I know I've written some stories and I've sent them, and I've always had this little kernel of doubt where I've been like, did they only accept it because I was a Bengali woman sending in a Bengali story? I mean, I think that's not correct. But I didn't want to do it. And that's something I didn't want to do and I wanted to avoid, and I still ended up doing it. But I think that's more of a hang up rather than an actual thing. One thing I really, like, lots of things I really wanted to do, which I ended up doing, was I've seen a lot of horror writers had a really excellent grasp of the like the sheer I'm just trying to think of the word, like the sheer depths to which horror writers can go to. I've read quite a lot of work of Christy Meester, of Brian Evenson now, where there was no limits where they stopped. Where when writing, there wasn't any point where it was like, this is too much. Like, we can't go any worse, any deeper, any harder than this. But they constantly go much worse, much deeper, much harder. Like Brian Evenson, sorry for anybody who's a big cat lover here, but Brian Evenson had a story called Killing Cats, which was like a one-page story, which was about killing cats. That was it. That was the entire story. I just want to have like the courage and the strength to be able to write those kind of things. That's me.
All right, Archita?
Right. What Yuna said earlier about like being an Indian writer and like you feel like you're pigeonholed because like there's this unsaid expectation that like since you're Indian and like, you're expected to write science fiction fantasy that draws upon your own culture, and sometimes I feel like it feels like an unfair expectation. Like when I like writing about a lot of things, and and if a story of yours gets accepted, which has like very noticeable Indian themes, like as Yuna said, like the back of my mind, like did they accept it because I'm Indian? Like is this like supposed to be like like an own voices thing? And then sometimes, so like when I first started writing, like obviously I was influenced a lot by Western pop culture, and I still am. And I wonder like is this story Indian enough, or but I was also told by like people that like like don't draw too much from Western culture, like try to write in your own voice. So like finding that balance, like how authentic you are, how how do you spot the influences that you have unconsciously internalized, and so that those are things that just happens at the the back of my mind, and sometimes if I write a story that I recently not recently, last year, the story still hasn't found a home. I wrote a story that uses a lot of Bengali folklore along with some Celtic myths. It's like a mixture of the two, and I keep wondering is this accessible to an international audience? Will they understand, or do I put in annotations to explain can the story stand on its own? So I mean, I don't think a white writer will has to think so much before submitting a story, but I think being writers of color have that they often have to do it, especially when you're submitting to an international magazine which has a very set criteria of what they accept and don't accept.
Yeah,
Just to-
I
just,
I think I
just-
understand exactly what you guys are talking about when it comes to looking at the being shoehorned in a certain way, and having to fight that to be able to have something to say at all. And it can get quite I feel like when I'm trying to write something, it unconsciously creeps in, and then I'm trying to beat it out of my work because
Yeah,
I don't want to appear like that. So,
yeah,
and when it comes to other people, when I see a little bit say, I don't want writing when I'm looking at say writing from English. I don't want writing that is so explicitly Indian that I can tell that it's come from
yeah,
somebody who wants to really put
yeah,
that across, and no taking names
yeah,
obviously, but I don't it's jarring to me. I feel like I need to
yeah,
take a step back, although there's a difference, I feel like, can you balance it, can you not? It And I also envy the people for whom it comes naturally to completely put it in, because you are so
yeah,
rooted, you're so uh, from brought up in a certain way, you're so focused in a certain milieu that it comes naturally. For me, I've moved around too much. I feel like I can't access that sort of a setting, and I feel like I'm stealing from a regional culture or another vernacular whenever I'm trying to write.
I just wanted to add
yeah.
100% that stealing feeling. I have felt that a lot. I mean,
Same.
as a Bengali person, I have access to only this much of Indian culture. We can't.
Yeah.
Exactly, yes.
Yes. uh anyway, sorry Chaitanya, please. Your thoughts.
I need to gather my thoughts again. There were a couple of things that Archita said that stood out to me. So one, I also tried at one point to write, because obviously growing up, everything that I read was heavily Western influence and everything. Those things I started writing were also in that vein. And when I went for a workshop when I was in the US, nobody said it out loud, but it struck me that um, what I had taken to that workshop was in no way, shape, or form unique. There was nothing that stood out about it, because it at that point it was just your basic Western European driven fantasy setting. So that was, I think, when I decided I needed to make a cultural reset for myself. So growing up, I'd never been particularly rooted, like you said, in even my own culture, even in Tamil culture. And I think at that point, after that workshop, I realized that for me to do something, or for me to really establish myself in any way, I would have to build that connection, because A, that wasn't being covered really anywhere, those kinds of stories. And B, what I was writing at that point didn't really have any weight to it. So that sort of reckoning had to be had. And I think there was another thing that Archita said about how magazines or editors or American audiences have this expectation, or foreign audiences in general have this expectation of works in representing foreign cultures or using foreign languages to have like italicized words, um, context for foreign languages given in brackets, anything to make it easier for them to understand. And that was something that I did follow for a lot of my earlier stories, which really didn't really try to send to markets or anything. But this is something that was brought up a lot in writing groups that I have and things also, where we realized really that we shouldn't be doing this. It's not something that we really should be catering to, because it's not something that is expected of people who speak only in English, right? And it doesn't serve the story. In many cases, it would take words away from the story to sit and try and paraphrase or explain again what you have written in a different language. So it's not something, I think that over time, I'm starting to realize that if the story has merit, and if it stands with or without that language barrier, then it's going to do well. Like, it's going to reach its audience and they're going to like it. And beyond that, it's not our responsibility to spoon feed anyone. That's generally where I've reached, I think.
I think it's also not a publishing convention now to require italicizations and everything. So
Yeah, they're starting to do away with it, I think.
Yeah,
But
some things. Okay, so before we end with your plug, I'm going to ask you guys one last question, which is, what is the worst writing advice you've received? The worst, the absolute worst. Go on, whoever wants to start, please.
Like the worst advice that we've been given or that we've given, like.
Yeah, yourself or yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure if this is the worst, but then like people like at workshops and elsewhere, they all say like if you want to be a writer, you should like make it a habit of writing every day. I've never been able to do it. Like I either write a few stories over a period of a few days, or like I will not write for a month or 6 months. Like I can't seem to find a balance. Like I've tried to make writing into a routine. Like every day I'm gonna spend at least half an hour to 1 hour like writing something, but like that like I procrastinate way too much, and it's never really worked for me. So whenever people say like you sort of make the time to write every day, like I'm a little sus of that advice. Like I like like kudos to everyone who can do it. It's incredible. Like you inspire me, but I have been so far not successful in implementing it.
I'm not either.
No, I have a writing group with 3 of the most prolific people that I can think of, and it just makes me feel so inadequate every day, because there's people like Prashant Srivatsa, who sits and writes 10,000 words in a day if he has the will, like if he sets himself to it. And there's like Gautam Bhatia and Pritesh, who if they start writing, they'll just go for 10 hours straight. And they do this like on a daily basis. And I'm just like, I cannot, like, there is no way for me to keep up with you. It's just not possible.
Okay.
10,000 words a day just sounds like I can't. I do 10,000 words every 6 months accidentally.
I feel like it's advice you give people without a full-time job.
Yes.
They all have full-time jobs.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not talking about.
This makes me feel worse. This makes me feel so much worse.
Okay. Guna, do you have bad advice?
I'm not sure, like, I know where the person was coming from, and I think in general it's not bad advice, but it's not advice that applies to me, which was basically they said, don't write anything that you don't know about. And on one hand, I get it, because I think like, especially when it comes to historical fiction, you should do your research. But they also meant it in the grounds of like, if you don't write about Americans, you're not an American. Or, and I'm a little sus, but I'm like, it's being like, that it becomes like, don't write about, that I'm like, if I want to write about fantasy, I've never met a single dragon in my life. What am I going to do? I'm just fucked. Or no, an eldritch horror, which cannot be imagined. Now, as people write like 6 pages about how they can't imagine what am I supposed to do? It's ridiculous. I can't take advice like that. Like, no.
This reminds me of a time when I was so angry with my school teacher back in school. And they'd given us a project and they said, write anything you want to write. And I wrote about how difficult it was to write about anything.
Fabulous. I'd love to read that.
And anyway, yes, Chaitanya, worst or not a bad advice.
I mean, this just goes back to my previous answer also, because I think I took a fiction workshop when I was in college, and one of the first things that I wrote a story about like playing football in my old apartment complex or something. And the fact there is that because of the nature of that story, half of it or a large chunk of it happens in Tamil, because like we all used to speak in Tamil, half of our conversations were in Tamil, and it doesn't have the same bite if you translate all of that to English. So I had a bunch of that written in Tamil, and I'd given like a translation next to each sentence of it. And the advice that came back to me from the professor of that class was basically just to remove it all. And it was basically, American audiences are not going to read this. So there's really no point in you writing in a different language, which was just all in all bad advice.
Yeah. I wish there were more publications that actually, from within this country, that something that also organized, like the Foundry sort of on here as well. It would be lovely to attend something like this in person. And I was just thinking about that all day today.
That'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
You don't have the equivalent in India at all. Like,
yeah, we don't.
You really don't.
All right. We're almost out of time, so I wanted to ask you guys to share something that you're really excited about and something that you are working on, and as well as your social media handle, so everybody can reach out to you and check out your work. Archita.
This year, like just like a few days ago, I got an acceptance from an anthology. So Dark Matter magazine is doing a new horror anthology, and on the theme of human monsters. And I sent in like a Bluebeard retelling for it, and I wasn't expecting to get in. Like I wrote it. I didn't even edit it properly. I just sent it in, and I got an acceptance letter, and the acceptance letter was immensely kind and amazing. So like I haven't like the last 4-5 months, like it's been like just a series of one rejection after another. So this acceptance it's like a big deal for me. So I'm very excited, and also because it's an anthology, which means it's going to be published in a book, and we'll send everyone a free copy. So I'm just like really excited about that. Like at least one good news, like one good thing has happened to me this year so far.
Congratulations.
So
Congratulations.
I know how that feels like.
Social media.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Archita Mitra, and I have a WordPress blog, which is architamitra.wordpress.com, and I'm also on Instagram and Facebook at the same name as Archita Mitra. Just like my surname Mitra has a double T, like everyone makes this mistake, so like yeah.
I am very excited about any number of rejections headed my way. So that's the most exciting thing that's going to happen to me. Everything is in waiting. But I do probably have a story coming out this month, but I'm not sure if the magazine's okay to announce it. So I'll just wait and see when it comes out and announce it on Twitter. Apart from that, is there any exciting things? Nope, I'm just excited for announcements. rejections. You can follow me on Twitter at @RunaChat93. RUNACHAT93. That's
Great. Right,
I don't think I have anything exciting to announce right now. I've just got a bunch of things that have been on hold at magazines for ages. If it counts as an achievement, I have a story that's approaching 6 months on hold. So,
that's amazing, actually. Good for that.
so that's something.
Fingers
But
crossed that there's an acceptance.
no, this magazine takes up to like a year for something, so I don't have any hope.
I hoping the best.
Yeah, that when it happens, it'll be exciting. But otherwise, no real news as of now. The only thing I'm working on at present and hoping to finish is a first draft of a novel. I'm about 50,000 words in and hoping to finish it around 80-ish. So soon, hopefully. And then
Novel about.
That's congratulations are due, I suppose, for that. Definitely.
eventually, not right now.
But
I
that's
think
a lot.
starting on a novel is a big deal. So
Yeah.
congratulations, that's still up there.
Congratulations.
Yes.
Yeah.
Your social media handle.
At Chaitanya Murli on Twitter, and pretty much the same thing on Instagram, I guess. I don't really use Facebook. I have one, but I don't look at it.
All right. All right. It was so good having you guys and talking about such random things. I
Oh, I
feel
just
like
want to say, Shinjini, thank you so much for organizing this really fantastic talk.
Yes,
Like,
Thank you so much.
just love.
Thank you so much for inviting us.
Yes,
And
it was really nice. I hope we can do this again at some point.
absolutely.
Yes. And looking forward to your stories. For all the attendees, I'm going to share all their work on the Discord. So keep a lookout and check it out. All right. Bye, guys.
Thank you.